Hello again. The east of England is a huge chunk of the country which covers the counties of Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Essex, Hertfordshire, Norfolk, and Suffolk. According to the preliminary results of the census, which was held last year, the population in this part of the country grew more than anywhere else over the last 10 years. Some places, like Peterborough in Cambridgeshire, grew by over 17%. In 2011, 183,631 people lived there, and now this has risen to 215,700. The cities of Cambridge and Bedford had similar increases in population, so let's say a little above 17%. Most of this has been driven by immigration rather than natural increase as a result of the surplus of births over deaths. The fiction is maintained that people are moving to those cities from other parts of the UK as well as abroad, but most of those moving there from different parts of the country are actually immigrants and the children of immigrants. We see this in Bedford, to give one instance, where many of the newcomers are Muslims of Pakistani heritage who have been living in other parts of Britain. The fact is that London is becoming very crowded, and towns in Essex like Harlow and others like Peterborough and Bedford are becoming overspills. Local authorities in London are doing their best to shift people for whom they are responsible out of their own boroughs as far away as they can get them from London. For example, places such as Waltham Cross, Waltham Abbey in Essex, and even further afield if they can possibly manage it. It's this tendency of the overspill from London moving into the east of England, which is fueling the soaring population in that part of the country. A few years ago, one would seldom see any visible minorities in Peterborough, and now it is a very diverse town. So what, you might say? Does it really matter if formerly white towns and cities become more diverse? Surely this is not a bad thing in itself. The problem is that with increasing diversity, one finds that rural districts and towns begin to resemble London in certain undesirable ways. Take Lincolnshire, for instance. I know the county fairly well because my wife is from Grimsby and she has many inbred relatives scattered among the potato fields of Lincolnshire. 30 years ago, it used to be peaceful and dull there, with the only excitement being the occasional discovery of a Colorado beetle which threatened the potato crop. It's very different now. The Lincolnshire town of Boston was a sleepy little place where nothing at all happened. It had a famous church spire, and that was about the limit of it. Then a few years ago, it became famous for being the murder capital of Britain, improbably enough. In the description to this video, I give a link to a news item on this, which seems almost surreal. Boston, of all places. This coincided with a sharp rise in the number of foreigners in the town. Between the 2001 census and that taken in 2011, Boston saw an increase of 467% in residents who had been born abroad. 5 years later, in 2016, the murder rate was running at 15 per 100,000 people, which was higher than the murder rate in London or Manchester. Forget for a moment whether or not I am a mad racist, and focus only on this one simple question. In the space of 10 years, almost 5 times as many foreigners moved into a small town. The numbers of people born abroad living in Boston rose from 1,700 in 2001 to almost 10,000 in 2011. Then, a few years later, the murder rate for the town is higher than that of London. Here is the question. Is this purely coincidental? Is there any connection at all between the greatly increased number of foreigners and the greatly increased murder rate? To the unbiased observer, there appears to be a direct and strong correlation between the number of immigrants and foreigners in any given district or town and the crime rate. Boston is only one example of this. Also in the description to this video, I give a link to the up-to-date figures for the crime rate in Boston as compared to the county of Lincolnshire as a whole. Guess what? Boston has more of almost every sort of crime than the rest of the county. Click the link, look at the figures. Violence and sexual crime, criminal damage, arson, antisocial behaviour, shoplifting, possession of weapons, public order. Boston is top of the league. I might mention that many people in Lincolnshire are very bitter about the changing nature of their towns, as are quite a few people also in Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire as well. There does seem to be a connection between increasing diversity and rising crime rates, and although these things may be wholly unconnected, this does seem a little unlikely.